So hello everybody. So if you're, could you please turn your cameras on if you're here? Yes, I see. I see Lily, okay, Brianna, Annie, Michaela, okay, okay, Lily, Jennifer. Good. All right. So let me start. Where am I? Okay. So welcome. For I should say so. Um, so today we're going to continue talking about content analysis. As if you watched or was here doing on Monday lecture, I started talking about content analysis, which is the first method of research we're going to discuss for this semester for this course. Um, So yeah, we stopped at I was talking about what content analysis is and the different types. So you could have quantitative content analysis or qualitative content analysis, or in other words, an inductive approach to content analysis or a deductive approach. So inductive and qualitative usually go together, and deductive and quantitative usually go together. So we're going to start. So this week, I'm going to focus on quantitative content analysis or the deductive approach. And next week, we're going to focus more on the qualitative approach. And so we stopped last time talking about the steps. So I'm just going to go, because this stuff could get very, when you talk about methods, it's like in abstract, it's like when you talk about driving in abstract without actually practicing it. So things might sound very like distant or vague or unrelatable. So I'm going to go over the steps real quick and then move on and give an example of what a content analysis research looks like. And then you would see how these steps are carried out. So I think we covered already the first 2 or 3 steps. So I talked about you state what message characteristics you're looking for. So are you looking at like the tone of the message, or is there like a message element, either like a visual element or like specific textual element you're looking for? So do they have women in the picture, or like for example, what's the size of the text? So you're looking at specific features, or like the tone. Did the speech had like a negative tone or a positive tone or an optimistic tone or a pessimistic tone? And then we said what you decide what you're also analyzing. So you're looking into pictures, or you're looking into text. Are you analyzing sentence by sentence? Are you analyzing paragraph by paragraph, image by image, post by post, etc. Uh, and then also we've talked about like you need like a time frame, like a place frame. So are you looking into the last, for example, 200 posts on Facebook, or like post from like March 2020 to March 2020 to March 2021. So you decide what's your time frame, and like any other selection criterion you have. And then we also, maybe we stopped here, I don't recall honestly. We said you could either do a census or a sample of the analysis population. The population here doesn't mean people, it means the unit of analysis. So how many units are going to go into the samples that you're actually going to analyze? Uh, so you either do all of it once you figure out the time frame, or you say a sample. So if it's still too large, even after I apply the time frame, you can say, yeah, from 5,000 messages, for example, we randomly selected 500 to be representative for the whole population of messages we have. The population of messages, we mean the whole everything. And then the sample is the thing that's going to qualify for you to analyze. And then here comes the differences between qualitative and quantitative. So in the quantitative or the inductive approach, you propose categories for the units of analysis. And these categories are called codes. I'm going to explain later what you mean by codes. So you're saying here are the categories in which we're going to apply. So for example, in the example I gave, the tone of the speech, I said we could have two categories. So one variable would be like the optimism, pessimism scale. So that's like you say, the speech has like a positive tone or a negative, or like, sorry, a pessimist tone or an optimist tone, right? So those are like two categories, you see, have any variable tone. And then another variable could be like the length of the sentences. So were they like one phrase sentence, like more than one phrase, like how long were the sentences are, or like how structured. So like very long or small. So that's another variable with two categories. But yeah, categories are the levels within each variable you're analyzing. And so again, you already state what variables you're looking for, and then you propose the categories by which you're going to apply to the content, okay? From those categories, you're supposed to develop a coding scheme. So a coding scheme is a list, a detailed list, hopefully or preferably, a detailed list by which you define each variable and each category explicitly and in good details. So what do you mean when you say a pessimist tone? Define pessimism. Like many more people will die. So talking like about a bleak future, that would qualify as pessimism. But like we're going to be okay, or like this nation will survive, or like we are going to win. So you specify exactly, okay, here are like examples of messages that would qualify as optimist, and this type of messages would qualify as pessimist tone, right? So that's the job of the coding scheme, is to show you in details how should the units fall into which category, okay? The qualification, the criteria. We call that the coding scheme. Sometimes called the coding scheme, code book, coding criteria. They all mean the same thing, okay? With that, then you apply these categories. Hopefully you test them first onto like a testing data. So you would like code for another speech rather than the main speech, like an old speeches, and you see you really figure out how these categories would fit into the data. From that, you run it again, and then you summarize the frequencies of the message within each category. And that way means, so we applied it to speeches of like 500 politicians. So what percentage of their speeches would fall into the, like would have a pessimist tone, and what percentage would fall into an optimist tone? Okay, that's only one example. If you're analyzing pictures, the same. So we're analyzing pictures by, let's say, a famous actor or actress. And then, yeah, like in one category, we'd say, okay, pictures about work, pictures about family, and pictures about, I don't know, self-promotion, or like self-centered, like selfies and such, okay? They have three categories. what percentage of like the total Instagram feeds fall within each category. Okay, that would be a numerical summarized uh, frequency of the messages within each category. And finally, yeah, you create a table and you demonstrate that to your readers. Okay, so these are the steps overall. And so before, I want to make sure that everybody understands like some key terminology we're using when we talk about content analysis. So what you're going to hear a lot is coding. So coding has nothing to do with programming in this sense. So coding means it's the process of turning like open-ended qualitative data points into measurable variables. And you do that by assigning a number into each category, hence coding. Because I could say pessimist is 0, optimist is 2, and maybe neutral is 1. So in each sentence, when you feel like it has a positive, pessimist tone, you mark it as 0. And then if it had like a optimist tone, you mark it as 2. And so that's what we call coding. So at the end, you would see how many zeros you have, how many ones you have, and how many twos you have. Okay? And you can think of other examples for yourself how this can be done. But that's what mean coding, because then a number would stand for a category. Okay. A variable is, as we've explained in multiple lectures before, like is the factor in the content that you're interested to see. So you're talking about the it has to do with the tone, and the content. So variable could be, again, speech tone. A variable would be a gender representation. Another variable would be like a racial diversity. A fourth variable could be type of sport. Sixth variable would be type of promotion, etc., etc. So whatever things you're looking for, depending on your research question. So this depends on what exactly you want to search or do your research on. Okay. Then a theme, sometimes, not always, but sometimes you would see in content analysis paper, people will be talking about themes. So theme is like a super category. So it's one larger category that encompasses multiple categories. And this happens when you end up with too many categories. You would then collapse it into like manageable number, like 3 themes. So once you do like these big categories, we would call them themes. So for instance, give an example of what I do. So I do research on Instagram a lot. So if you pick an account, like let's say marketing on Instagram, or like marketing communication messages on Instagram. So they are one like about product promotion, event promotion, branding, self promotion, and then you have partnerships. So you could end up with like 8, 9 categories. But probably then you would say there are 2 main themes. I would then have just all promotions about like sponsored promotions, let them have all into like one theme. So anything the influencer promotes about another entity, whether it's a brand, an organization, product, etc. And then anything the celebrity promotes about themselves, that's self-promotion, whether it's like a concert, a new venue they're opening, etc. So that's something you could do. Like, okay, you had multiple categories, but then you said, let me then just have 2 themes that encompasses like those categories. So you have 2 manageable categories or themes rather than 8 or 9. So that's sometimes called theme. And then the unit of analysis, as I say, is like the small components in the text you're going to look at. So are you looking at images? Are you looking at text? Are you looking at books, etc.? So in order to make this point much clearer, like what's analysis, going to similar to what I did earlier with literature review, I'm going to analyze our article that uses content analysis. So the topic the article I picked is called "Strong is the New Skinny: A Content Analysis of Inspiration Websites" by Upal uh, and all in 2014. And this article wanted to study what message or what's the message or what narrative do Fitspiration websites send about body appearance and exercise and fitness and dieting. Okay, that's the purpose of the study. Fitspiration, if I'm not sure if people hear this word or not, like Fitspiration or Fitspo, is the content that promotes fitness as standard of beauty and encourage people to seek fitness as, especially women, so it's targeted towards women. Like, so it's inspire people like by rising their self-expectation of themselves to have extremely fit bodies, like muscular bodies. So this is how what Fitspo content looks like. So yeah, it would basically be of women who are extremely fit and sometimes would be accompanied by messages like this, like work strong the skinny, or like strong is the new skinny, things like that, right? So probably, or maybe you've seen something like this before. And then, so the research question that the authors had were the following. So they had 5 research questions. So what body types do Fitbit websites feature and promote, right? So about body types. What were the beauty ideals promoted? Or like, was the beauty ideal promoted? Does these websites emphasize thin ideal messages? The messages will be like textual messages accompanying the visual representation. And thin ideal or fit ideal is like the message that show you an idealistic fit body and calling you that this is the thing you should imitate or like aspire to be. So those are called thin ideal or like fit ideal messages. And then, do these websites show women bodies in a sexualized manner or like a sexually objectifying manner? Okay, that's the 4th question. And the 5th research question is, what motives for or motivation for fitness were endorsed by the FISPO messages? So what are the things they are emphasizing into why should people or how should people become fit? Okay. So from reading these questions, okay, these 5 research questions, can someone tell me if they are exploratory or explanatory in nature? Are these exploratory research questions or explanatory research questions?
They're exploratory.
Yes, that's correct. And why is that, Eric?
Because they're not trying to connect the images back to a theory of some sort. They're just asking about the images in general and trying to describe them.
Yes. So as you could see in here, none of the question is trying to connect, for example, sexualized images into something else. So it's not asking, do sexualized images like excite people or provoke people or upset people or like causes depression or something? They're just saying what type of images we would see. So that's a classic definition of exploratory, a classic example of exploratory. You're just showing what a thing or what a phenomena looks like, okay? Using, of course, the variables you research. Okay, so yeah, these are exploratory, and most of the time, content analysis is always almost always exploratory because you're not connecting it to another variable, unless you combine it to something else. Like you do content analysis and then you measure people's response. Okay, that's And so now some technicalities. So these were the steps. Remember about selection of data and everything. So the selection of data. So how they did it is that is they search FITSPO or FITSPiration. Actually, I made a mistake here. Like they were like 3 search engine websites. So you then use Google, Bing, and Yahoo search, and they search for like FITSPO and FITSPiration. That's raised. And then only website in the first 3 search engine research pages were included. So they didn't go past page 3. So only the websites in the first 3 pages in each search engine. Then excluded overlapped and deactivated websites. So in the search engine, in the search results, sometimes it gets redundant or overlapped. So because they would be 2 web pages from the same website, so they excluded that. They ended up with 51 websites. And then in each website, they coded like only the first 10 images. So that's a sampling process for them. All right. Remember when I said you can just pick for the sake of simplicity, like a subsample. So that's what they did here. They said, okay, we're going to pick the first 10 images of each website, and those are the only ones we're going to use. So obviously, you can do simple arithmetic, 10 images times 51 websites. You would end up with 510 web images. And the units of an analysis, remember that what they are analyzing, you'd be analyzing text, picture, and picture with the accompanying text. If they have a picture and then you would see like a blurb or a description at the bottom, so they would code for both, or even like a picture with like a printed text within, like or on the picture itself, or like it would be like look like a poster. So they would code for that, which means they're not coding for like articles in these websites. They're not coding for like video content or audio content. These are the units within this population in here only. Is this point clear? They're only doing pictures and pictures that have text, okay? And now, and here are the variables. So because they had 5 different research questions, they had 5 different variables. So the first one was like body type, that we saw in the research question, and it had 3 things. So it's defined as like either underweight, overweight, and muscular. Okay. And then the beauty ideals composed of like 5 different criteria. So it was about the skin, teeth, facial feature, figure, and breast. Okay. Sexually objectifying content was defined along like if it's like exposing skin and sexualized messages. And thin ideal messages were messages that show like body transformation. So they were like saying like this would constitute 10 ideal messages. And then motives for fitness. So it had like appearance, food, and dieting. Those were like 3 motives, right? My question to you is just to discuss how are we supposed like or like the author, how are we supposed to define these categories in here? How am I supposed to define muscular? Or how am I supposed to define like sexualized messages? How can I do that? How should I do that?
I think you would have to go through each of these in your study and sort of explain your like where you're coming from in defining each of these, and also acknowledge that there may be some room for debate in some of these categories, like especially with like what I thought of with exposing skin being under sexually objectifying content, like that would be something that reading this study I could debate and say, well, you know, exposed skin might not be sexually objectifying. It could just be, you know, what people generally wear for comfort during fitness, etc. So I think it would definitely be up to the authors of the study to be really careful in justifying all of these and being really explicit about their sort of categories.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah. Why should the authors be explicit? What's the point of that?
I mean, I guess in a quantitative study, you want as little room for debate as possible. And it also makes your results more credible when you're more explicit about your justifications.
Yeah. So yeah, Lily is absolutely right. So what the authors need to do, or like what you need to do if you are conducting like a similar research, is then to go like and step by step define or tell us exactly how you define each one of these categories. What qualifies as underweight? What qualifies as overweight? What qualifies as muscular? What qualifies as exposing skin? What qualifies as skin messy, etc. You have to state explicitly that. So the readers know or can tell how the authors reach their conclusions. Because if it's a quantitative study, I have to see how the data you ended up with come from the categories you propose. Okay. And that's exactly, well, not exactly, but what the authors tried to do. And I have we can criticize that later. But then that's what they did. So you will end up with a list or a coding scheme. So this is what we mean by coding scheme. It would be something like this. You define what you mean. So for body type, they said we use the female photographic figure rating scale by another author. Okay. So you could come up with your own definition, or you rely on another model or another categorization developed by someone else. So if there's something already developed, you say, okay, I'm just going to use it and apply it to my case. And for example, so here, this one, they had this, so objectively thin were like women below the underweight range, objectively curvy women above the overweight range, and muscular women with visible muscle tone. And then if you go to the original article, it would specify exactly what that range are. So they use different things like waist to hip ratio, like the thickness of the arms, things like that. So things more like very specific about the visuals of the images. And so you would have something established by someone else. And here's the trick. Regardless of what you feel. So regardless of you personally as a coder think this is like overweight or underweight, you just say we're using this scale and we're just gonna apply it uniformly. So we'd have consistent results. So you see how remember when I say the quantitative approach is more about like objectivity. So you leave your personal preferences somewhere else, and then you just say, okay, here's a scale we're just gonna use, on all the cases. So that's one. So as I said, yeah, they use the previous established coding scheme. And then for the beauty ideal, they said, so they only had 1 and 0. So either has a beauty ideal or feature beauty ideal or not. They said, if a woman has all or some of the following, so clear and blemish-free skin, okay, neat and shiny hair, symmetrical facial features, so, symmetry, straight white teeth, lanky figure, and supple breast. So here's like more like specific physical features. And so if some or all of these physical features exist in a picture, they would say this picture is promoting a beauty ideal. So you get this part, right? So they would do it for some or all. They didn't do it one by one. Like even if it had like some, they would say it had a beauty ideal. And then sexualized content. So if the post has one of the following, and so it says sexualized images, and here's back to what Lily was saying. It's like women in bathing suits or underwear. Okay. So this is the definition they're going to use. Now, you disagree with that, you agree with that is a separate issue. But they're telling you, we as authors, or we as coders, this was our criterion. So the result, the number you're going to see later reflect that. So this is like empirically. Whether you're like conceptually disagreeing with this point would be something different, but the results would be valid according to this definition. Okay, right? So this is the tricky part about quantitative studies, because it's objective, because the authors are telling you we separated ourselves from how we feel, but it's still taking a point of what scale or what coding scheme was used, right? And then sexualized tests were like promoting women as an object of sexual pleasure. So if the text had like a sexual undertone, it would be considered like sexual content. And honestly, in the article, this part was not detailed why. In other articles, actually, the authors explained, but not in this article. And then thin ideal messaging. And so it would like they had 4 categories for this one. So thin ideal messaging is like any image, like any candidate that's showing before and after. I'm sure you've seen these before, right? Like the before body and the after body. So like March 2017 and then March 2020, and then you would see like super fit in the present, but then like below average body in the past or something. It's like they would show you like an extreme difference usually, and the idea is to showing you like they've reached an ideal body. Thin pose is when if women are displaying poses make them look thin or thinner. And they gave specific examples. So if they are angling the body at 45 degrees, so it's actually a trick. So you're not facing the camera. You're sort of like this. So you won't see the full figure. So this is one visual trick. And then putting thin pose, hands on the hips. That's also a trick. So they borrowed this from like photographers who know who do these things. So they applied it also to to this. Okay, so thin pose, and then with messages they focused on textual messages. I mean, they focused on like fast stigmatizing and thin praise. So if the text accompanying the photo was like had like fat shaming, basically. Like for example he gave is like suck it up now and you won't have to suck it in later. And obviously they're talking about tummies, things like messages like this. And thin praise is like messages that will possibly portray thinness. So for example, do it for skinny jeans or like less is more, those type of messages. Okay. And finally, the motive for fitness, which means what thing they're emphasizing when they are encouraging people to become fit. So it could be about emphasizing exercise for appearance purposes. So for example, like you're focusing like these muscle like or toning. That's the thing they should look at. Or they have food guilt inducing. So that's another category. So encouraging viewers to feel guilty over food, or feel guilt. So you would show, for example, an image of a woman's flat stomach, and then they would say, "Oh, so you'd rather have that bag of bag of potato chips, right? So you see, it's about motivating, like inducing guilt about eating a bag of potato chips. And finally, last category is like dieting restriction is like encouraging diet restriction by talking about specific meal or like quitting soda or quitting sugar, things like that. Okay. So these are the categories defined explicitly. And then, as we said in the process, we have to have like two coders. So what the authors did, so they two independent coders coded the images separately. So independent means separately. So it's not like, so if I'm having Ariana and Kate, I don't put them in the same room and then they look at the same images together and they code together. No, but they will be separated. So I'll send Ariana a sample and Kate a sample, and then they'll do it separately to train. So the coders or the raters they used were not familiar with physical content before, and they were blind to the study hypothesis. So they didn't know what the first author was trying to get into. And before they analyzed the 510, they were trained on a separate set of images that looked similar, but were not included in the final analysis. So just to make sure they understand what they mean by what the coding scheme means by a thin post or like a guilt-inducing messages. All right. So they train, and then if you see like they're consistent in their coding, you make them do the main content or the 510 messages in this case. So then each coder examine all the content, and then a third judge, who's usually the first author, which was the case in this article as well, would resolve any coding disagreement. Okay. So let's say Ariana and Kate disagreed if one had like a thin pose or not. Like a third judge will look into at it and say, yeah, actually this is a thin, looks a thin pose to me. And so the idea is to establish intercoder reliability is like more than two people agree on how to categorize the content. So for every case, like for the full 510, at least two individuals have to agree that it belongs to whatever code it was given, right? So the third judge went to all over the 510 images for all the variables and resolve those differences, okay, if they exist. Okay. And so, yeah, really quick about, so for the coding, for the results, before we get to the final results, so coding reliability is assessed by something called the Cohen's-Kappa test. You don't have to know this, how to it's done mathematically, but it's something that measures to what extent two coders agree on something. It's like the correlation, how much, or the percentage of agreement, okay? And so the Cohen's-Kappa range from 64% to 100%. So in some variables, they agreed 100%. In some variables, the agreements were about like 60-ish%. So the high agreements were when they did body type, so thin, overweight, muscular, and when they did sexual objectification. And you can guess why, because sexual objectification was defined very explicitly and very strictly, right? So whether, yeah, so that's why it had a high level of agreement. For thin ideal variables, it was relatively lower, like 65% to 75%. So like when you talk about the thin pose or like guilt-inducing content, we started to see more disagreements, but it's still high. It's still a high percentage, like at least in like 2/3 of the cases, they were agreeing. And here are the results, finally. So, so this is what the authors found. So you report the results at the end. So 97% of the images had like a thin body type, or about 98 actually. About 24 had like muscular, about 11% had like an overweight. For the culturally based beauty ideals, 94% or like 93.5 had beauty ideal images. So the blemish-free skin, the white straight teeth, etc. Sexual objectifying variables, so about 43% and a half had like women in bathing suits, about 61 in underwear. So the total would be 43 and 84 with redundant images. So obviously you can have an image with a woman in a bathing suit and an underwear at the same time. But the total of sexually objectifying images was like about 85%, according to the way it was defined by the authors. But just remind everybody about this, okay? And then for the sexually objectifying text, it was like about 33%, right? Thin ideal variables, about 70% had like the before after thing. A thin pose or poses were around 46%, and weight segmentation was about 47% of the whole 510 images. And then finally, last variable about what motive was invoked when showing motivation for fitness. So exercise for appearance was like about 93% of the times. Negative guilt inducing or inducing guilt about food was like 26% of the cases. And about dieting with friends through messages. So here's my about textual messages. If it's about dieting, only 20% of the images or the text fall into that category. Okay. So this is a classic quantitative content analysis. The point is then to show summarize the content in numerical terms. And so now, let's do some practice. So if you remember the coding categories, there's an image like this one, send a thin ideal messaging. According to the coding scheme we showed.
Yes, because it includes a before and after.
Yes, so it's showing, yes, the before and after thing. Okay. And
the 45-degree angle pose.
Yes. And another thing, so in the same variable, right? So that's so it has a before and after. It has so you see that trick, yeah. And what is she doing with her hand? See, her pose. What is she putting her?
On her hip.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. That's another same pose trick. Yeah. So you see that like with the 45 degrees. Yeah. And so in coding, you would these things could be tricky, but so you would notice you would code for like different verbs. Although what the authors did, like if you see in here, they lumped it all under one category. So the same pose, if she's doing angling the body at 45 degree or hands on the hips, it's all like same pose. So they did not treat it separately, all one category. So anything about same pose is just same pose, right? Okay, so so you're either doing a same pose or not. By the way, how would you rate the body types then? So underweight, overweight, muscular.
I would say the second one, the after, is underweight. She doesn't look very muscular.
Yeah. So it's not. So, but in this case, it's right. Especially if you have a range, it also can get tricky. So regardless if you think she actually lost weight or not, because there are tricks to look thinner, as we discussed. But what the point is, what this message is trying to say to the audience, that thinness is a good thing. So that's the point of doing this type of, yeah. Here's another one. So it's another example. These are actual pictures, by the way. So I've not created them myself. These are from the web. What motive for fitness does each of these pictures trying to provoke? So you see one on the left and one on the right.
The second image is trying to induce guilt about food.
Yes. Yes. So that's a classic example. Yes. And the first one is, you remember the first motive? I mean, I can go back. So you see it in here. So which one of the categories under the exercise and food variables? Which one of these three?
Would it be exercise appearance?
Yeah. Yeah. It would be exercise appearance. Yeah. Yeah. If it's also, yeah, so it's about the exercise appearance. Yeah. So you see, by the way, so in your coding, you're coding for each variable separately. I think people understand that, right? So you'll start with the body type. So in one column, you'll do body type. And then you'll go to the next variable, you do the coding, and you then go to the third variable, do coding, and then fourth variable, and fifth variable. So you'll do 5 different codings for each image. I hope that was clear for from the results, right? Okay. Okay, and so that's it for that part. Then I have questions. Actually, this is going to be discussion on the discussion board. So your reflection or reaction to this article. So it's actually posted to Blackboard, but also from my presentation. I think I summarized it very well. So yeah, so what do you think? So looking at the variables, do you think they could be objectively assessed according to the description given by the authors? Do you think some of them were vague? So any of the categories that we're giving, do you think some categories were vague, or like you wanted to know more details about how exactly they were measured? And why did the authors, why the authors did not include some other variables? So the authors did not, for example, code for ethnicity or for age of the model. Why is that according to the purpose of the research? Okay. And also, do you think some other categories needed to be included in these variables? So, or do you think these categories were exhaustive? So if you're looking again, let me go back. Yes, right here. So here under like body type, do you think some like a fourth variable could be included? Like, I don't know, average maybe, or like here, if sexually objectifying variables, do you think they were better categories to include, right? Other than these two, like, what do you think? So yeah, this is you'll have. So I'm gonna post it later today, and you have like more than a week actually just to yeah, post your opinion. And again, this is just also only a reflection for discussion board. It's not by no means like a detailed assignment. Just what do you think about it? So you need to do research. So yeah, I hope this explain how content analysis looks like in practice. Okay. We will talk more in details in coming days about you. I think you could guess how it might get complicated, how it's going to, why is it useful or not, and we'll see how it could be applied to different contexts. So yeah, do you have any questions? Okay, cool. So that's it for today. Have a blessed day, and if you have questions, yeah, you could shoot me an email or something. And yes, the grades, to remind everybody, yeah, it's going to be posted soon. And so thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Hi, Aziz.
Hi, yeah, hi, Susan.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm good. Thank you. How was class today? Was that your second one?
Yes.
That was your second today.
Yes. Yes.
Is that hard to do one after the other on Zoom?
Yes. Yes. It's the voice thing. Yes. That's the hard part. Yeah. It's better. Like I think I'm focused more during the second one, but I'm physically more exhausted. Yeah.
Yeah,
But it was,
that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I won't keep you now since you've been on for a couple hours. I just shot you an email. Maybe we can chat tomorrow or Friday. You can just look at your calendar and we can catch up on kind of how things went and how things are going for you overall. And yeah, it'd be fun.
Okay. Yeah. That's awesome. So
Okay, yeah, just shoot me an email back and let me know maybe any free windows you have and we'll find a mutually convenient time.
Cool.
All right.
Cool.
Have a good rest of your day. What time is it there?
You too. It's 9 p.m.
That's hard. Gosh. All right, go to bed.
Yeah. Yeah. I got